Project Lawful aka Planecrash by Arwayne aka Eliezer Yudkowsky and Lintamande. The Woman of Irori, Episode 189.
The next morning, she sets out bound and determined to hang a fifth circle spell and also everything else, or at least the utility spells she's accustomed to. Detect thoughts, unseen servant.
She'll get maybe a quarter hour in before there's an emergency interrupt. Somebody, presumably a ninth circle somebody or an eighth circle who got very lucky, just hammered a scry past the project wards and set off scry detection. To be specific, the scry detection of a security less than 40th from Carissa Sevar's bedroom. Security has standing hidden orders from Igorian about this situation, and they don't involve Carissa Sevar staying in her bedroom after that happens. She has 3 rounds to collect magic items, valuables, or clothes if applicable and prioritized.
Spellbook, bag of holding, and sure, she'll grab a dress so as not to potentially get kidnapped by Keltham in her nightclothes. Unless on reflection she thinks that's tropier. Save that for later.
The fortress's 7th circle, Commander Hadrian, is here, and Elias Abarco and Oligario. Hadrian casts a heavily metamagicked non-detection on her, and then those 3 hustle Carissa Sevar out of the fortress, to the edge of the Forbiddance, with scry detection up on full.
She does not ask where they're going. She doesn't, actually, need to know. Unless they're not, in fact, acting in her interests. Here, like if this is an assassination attempt from either church or crown. She suspects not, though. If Abigail wanted her dead, she'd have done it last night, and Aspexia would not kill off the chosen of Asmodeus. For real now. With no indication from Asmodeus, he wanted that done.
They teleport immediately once they're out of the Forbiddance. Arrive in what looks to be a stone-shaped underground cavern, with, to arcane sight, immediately visible even without any further analysis, an ongoing permanent abjuration effect running over the whole visible cavern. And then they're moving forward, crossing another threshold of arcane sight visible Forbiddance, towards a heavy steel door that gets unlocked by an audibly whispered magical password. And then they're inside a safe-house cell with walls that look like iron and are no doubt at least 1 inch of iron. The wide area abjuration is running here too. The steel door swings shut.
"At ease, Sevar," says Commander Hadrian.
Carissa's heartbeat is going to take a while to believe him about that. Well, this sure is ambiguous between being a safe house and a prison more than most places are. Probably it gets used for both, as needed. "I'd like regular situation updates," she says, and sits, so the fact her legs are shaking won't be visible, and calms herself by concentrating on identifying the wide area abjuration that's not the Forbiddance. Mage's private sanctum. Extremely reasonable. It prevents all divinations aimed at those inside. 5th circle, which means she can learn it now. The only reason they didn't have it blanketing the Project Fortress is that it prevents detect thoughts.
Hadrian Earwine, all apparently normal on the project, and I'll let you know the instant an anomaly is reported, we get orders relayed from above, or my telepathic bond breaks, says Commander Hadrian. If you have analysis urgently to report to Igorian, I can relay via the fortress.
Not at this time. Do you have plane shift, or an item of it, or an open slot into which you could prepare it right now?
Why do you ask?
If Keltham explodes Cheliax, we go to Dis and regroup from there. Dispater has named me his favored possession. I can operate there unbothered, at least for a little while, and Keltham can't wish kidnap me from the 2nd layer of hell. Further justification involves a secret I thought no one at all was cleared to know, but it's barely possible you might be, as you're on the project in part to read my mind. Do you know of what I'm speaking, or not?
I've been informed of 2 major church secrets involving 2 elements of your soul sale price. These 2 are not cleared to know about either secret. I don't have a tuning fork for Avernus. This is an oversight, and if you deem it urgent enough, can be corrected by teleport. A metaphorical usage of tuning fork, but a standard one in Galarian when speaking of plane shifts.
I'd say it's urgent, yes.
Acknowledged, says the commander. He pauses no longer than a round or 2. ETA 1 minute from Igorian.
If this was an attack by Keltham, Igorian won't be there in 1 minute. If it was something else, a feint, a routine spy operation that got noticed this time for some reason, a communication with someone, a test of their defenses. A test. Is it possible that this is, again, Abigail? That she's in a mindscape as she must have been last time she awoke to an unexpected catastrophe? That the Queen is checking whether Carissa Savar, in fact, presented with the opportunity to claim the throne of Cheliax? If it is such a test, news will come soon that Abigail is dead. Carissa's going to be so annoyed. If that's what's going on, she's busy. She has important work to do. Did Greater Carissa arrange this? Is it part of the Keltham seduction plan? It seems at least a good time to urgently try to rederive it, along with whatever else she figured out about Keltham and what he was trying to do.
The steel door opens. The Seventh Circle security takes a bag of holding from the person on the other side. The steel door closes. We now have 2 scrolls of plane shift. Tuning fork for Avernus. I already have a tuning fork for prime material, says Hadrian. Update from project site. Lady Pineda can't find anybody there threatening her friends, but warns that a Keltham kidnapping may not count as a threat to her curse.
She wishes she'd gotten Mylal out and on his vacation before the next emergency. She's annoyed at Keltham, actually, for interrupting that, even though this is the stupidest possible emotion along any imaginable dimension since one. Keltham couldn't possibly have known that. 2, if he did know, there is no conceivable justification for him to care. 3, Carissa could literally just have not tortured Mayal, and then she wouldn't have this problem no matter what other people had chosen to do. Also, this could be a test. It'd be reasonable of Abigail to test her, really, and this is the way that a test run by Abigail would be. No, wait, that's important enough she should actually be Alani about it, at least briefly, and if the result of Abigail's test is that Carissa is too Alani to test anymore, well, so be it. On the test hypothesis, she predicts that Abigail dies and she is faced with a choice about whether to track down her soul and get it back, or take the throne and rule Cheliax. On the not a test hypothesis, she predicts a Kelthamish sort of thing happening from a completely unexpected direction, the sort of thing none of their planning accounted for because Keltham is an alien with alien patterns of thought and alien triggers for escalation and alien constraints on his being. Well, she will prep her spells and wait and see which it is. Abarco, have you prepared spells this morning?
Some of them, sir.
Open slots at each spell level? It's pretty typical in security roles where your precise needs for the day might vary.
Yes, sir.
Put up a scaffold and put teleport, greater invisibility, fly, and detect thoughts on it. I want to see if I can master Fifth Circle faster if I have arcane sight up and am mirroring someone while they do it.
Abarco looks to the Seventh Circle in case he's supposed to do something else with his free spell slots.
Put them up partially so she can observe, and then take the manifold down before completion so you don't lose the slots. He'd ordinarily hesitate to go with even that much. It distracts Abarco. But they may have to escape to hell in the very worst case, and Sivar having those slots then may help.
Right then. Carissa wants to be a Fifth Circle wizard, and with the world's fanciest headband, arcane sight, and a cooperative existing Fifth Circle wizard trapped in a room with her, she ought to be able to do it. And it'll take her mind off the possibility of Cheliax being annihilated by her boyfriend. If they do have to flee to hell, they'll be glad if she can hang the teleport anyway. Plane shift won't land neatly on a fortress between Avernus and Dis, like Aspexia's gate did. And while she does that, she thinks, Keltham, what are you doing? What conceivable plan involved refusing to trade with anyone but lawful evil until I sold my soul, and then allowed for trade with the Padisha Empire? Did you have something to do with the assassination attempt at the party? What would you do if you were Keltham and had fled Cheliax? Why is she scared to think about that? Quite abruptly, Carissa Sivar casts True Seeing with her crown. Nothing happens. Because she's not in a dreamscape of Abigail's and not already kidnapped by Keltham in a clever fashion that he for some reason wasn't yet revealing. And these are in fact Olegario and Abarco and the new Seventh Circle assigned to monitor her. If a more important occasion to cast True Seeing comes up, she's going to feel like an idiot.
Is there something, says Abarco in the middle of patiently assembling his teleport while Carissa attempts to mirror him.
No, Just feeling paranoid.
Right. The lower cross at your 4 o'clock is sticky. Sticky is what happens when you've miscalculated a spell form slightly, and the magic is interacting with nearby magic that it was meant to be non-interactive with. It can ruin a spell form, or just make it sloppy and more energy-intensive than it'd need to be.
Carissa wishes Elias Abarco was either slightly more or slightly less of a dick. He could pick either, really. She fixes the lower cross at her 4 o'clock. There's the optimistic hypothesis that Keltham was going to do something to benefit lawful evil at everyone else's expense, which implies the interpretation that he's now also going to benefit the Padisha Empire? Doesn't quite fit. She isn't sure how to break down doesn't quite fit into pieces she could be Alani at, but it feels like she's trying to write a story, not seeing a set of motivations Keltham might really have beneath the actions she can see. Under less optimistic hypotheses, he was willing to trade unfairly with lawful evil people because they trade unfairly, and the trade wasn't, in fact, fair. If Keltham had been planning to conquer the world, he wouldn't want to trade with people he was about to conquer, to present himself as engaged fairly with them when in fact acquiring the resources to destroy them. And maybe, in panic about Carissa selling her soul, he's now decided to conquer the world less the Padisha Empire. Also doesn't fit. If Keltham had to pick someone to not conquer, the Empire is probably unusually bad by Dathilani sensibilities. It has slavery, not half-assed Osirian Abadar-friendly debt slavery, but full proper human slavery and a slave trade. It is engaged in wars of conquest of its own. Maybe Keltham decided it counted as effectively lawful evil, or the Emperor revealed secret proof of his lawful evil to Keltham, and she's way overthinking this. If you're confused, something's missing from your picture of reality. What is she confused about? Where to start? Why Keltham stopped trading with everyone? Why Keltham told her it would be better for Cheliax if she didn't sell her soul? Why Keltham started trading with the Empire? Why Caden Kayleen didn't want Carissa to sell her soul full price? What greater Carissa wanted and was planning? What Nethys is playing at here? Why Nefreti said she couldn't help Keltham, and then kidnapped Ione, who by all accounts is helping the scientific revolution, so maybe Nefreti was just lying. Why Zonkuthan attacked the project, when he in fact wouldn't have minded Asmodeus taking over the world. How Osirian spies are so effective. How the Rovagug cultists found out where Keltham was being kept, and how they were able to get right to his bedroom. Why Caden Nethys warned the project about that. Why Dispater offered to make Asmodea and Peranza retroactively never have suffered. That was in hindsight not a remotely normal kind of God clause. She was just too busy evaluating it as a test to evaluate it as anything else. Why Asmodea killed herself, if it wasn't because she knew she'd go to the gardens, and if it was, how she could have known something she caused by killing herself. No, that's probably just Arakura too, still has a scrap of prophecy. What does it mean to still have a scrap of prophecy? What are Nethys and Arakura doing? Why Cheliax hasn't attacked Osirian, if war is inevitable, Nidal's disposed of, and Keltham's bluffing about his ability to destroy Cheliax? Why Osirian hasn't forced Cheliax to terms, if Keltham's not bluffing? There's a problem with the comforting theory that the Padisha Empire is just lawful evil too. Keltham has been at whatever he's up to for a while. He did that the day Carissa left to sell her soul. That strongly favors explanations that have something to do with Carissa selling her soul. What does Carissa selling her soul change for Keltham? Maybe it means that he lost hope, that she would oppose Cheliax and oppose hell, which he can't have been considering that all that likely to begin with. Could he? From an outside perspective, it does seem like many people infected with Islandism become opposed to hell. However, Asmodea wanted to go to Abaddon. Carissa feels like it is straightforwardly obvious, if you've ever met Carissa, that she isn't going to become opposed to hell for Asmodea-ish reasons. She kind of did become opposed to hell for Carissa-ish reasons, namely how it's wasteful and not very good at what she thinks should be its job and keeps turning people into paving stones when they're possible to use better than that. Namely, the thing she said to Mayol, stupidly, yesterday, that she does owe him something. She owes it to him to make as much of him as she can. That's heresy, of course, but Asmodeus did compact with her. Does Keltham know about Asmodeus's compact with her? Did that change his plans, make them more the sort of plans that are in line with the interests of people on Galarian? What if Nefreti Klapati wasn't lying? What if it's true that she can't help Keltham, that Nethys can't help Keltham, and it's just that the scientific revolution doesn't help Keltham because Keltham is not, at this point, aiming to build civilization on Galarian, doesn't have any goals on Galarian at all, because he's trying to kill Asmodeus. It's totally what he'd do. She loves him very much. Snack Service insists it's serving Asmodeus's interests somehow. How? Well, see, Keltham is planning to kill Asmodeus, and Nethys and Caden are steering for something better for good than killing Asmodeus, but also better for Asmodeus than killing Asmodeus, which would have to be pretty much anything. There's that prophecy that if Asmodeus is threatened, he'll unleash Rovegug to eat the threat, and then the whole universe will be consumed. And it'd be just like her idiot boyfriend to decide that's a threat and he's ignoring it. There's a thought knocking at the back of her skull, waiting to be thought, a terrible and dangerous one. She's in a mage's private sanctum. Her boyfriend is planning to murder her god. It had better speak up, whatever it is. This is approximately the most unpleasant to acknowledge possible reality, ever in all of history. But if that's what good has been playing for, they've been helping her. They've been right. Asmodeus does not make good use of the souls under his care. He does not make good use of the souls under his care because that is not his only value. He holds it alongside other desires, like for people to have absolute power over one another, the power to make them suffer excessively for no reason. You could have a lawful evil god of the words that Carissa spoke to Maeliol, that she has a duty to make him stronger and not weaker, that her ownership of him does not permit her to destroy him carelessly for no reason, but that god wouldn't be Asmodeus. People don't want to go to hell because hell is a bad place. They are choosing Abaddon instead because hell is a bad place. It is so hard to find Elani who can also be Asmodeans, because if you have any other choices, you shouldn't, actually, serve the god of being allowed to destroy your subordinates for no reason, out of incompetence or because it's momentarily funny. Asmodeus sucks, and if not for the thing where he'll destroy the world if you try to destroy him, Keltham would be right to want to attempt it. If she does go to hell and get all the paving stones to fix, they're going to be unimaginably worse than Mylol. And no one did that by accident because they sincerely believed that they had to learn how to torture people. They did it because they wanted to. It's not actually hard to see. Not at all. Not once you look. A little child could see it. Probably destroying people is bad, actually. Even if you don't have to look at them and talk to them afterwards. Even if you never have to think about them again. Nethys saw that Keltham, when he learned what Asmodeus was really like, would try to kill him. And by default, that would definitely be a complete disaster. So Nethys and Caden Kayleen have been carefully maneuvering to arrange terms that Asmodeus can accept, terms that are better than killing Asmodeus for Asmodeus, and better for good than, well, potentially they just have to aim for better than literally everything being destroyed by Asmodeus. How could she have heard that story and not had her faith snap instantly? How could she have ever worshipped something that was willing to destroy the world? Caden's interventions all served Asmodeus in that they set up some compromise Asmodeus is going to be willing to agree to avert a war. The compromise might in fact involve Carissa becoming a power in hell who does not destroy people, ever, even the ones she actually hates. The half-wishes deal was better than the full wishes deal because it prompted Carissa to ask for the rights to those souls that seek her. That's threading an entire universe through the eye of a needle. But if anyone could do that, Nethys could. The reason Nefreti said she couldn't help Keltham in any way is that if Nethys just said to Asmodeus, look, that their mortal is going to destroy you unless you accept our compromise, Asmodeus would check if Nethys put that mortal there to pull that off. It's important that Keltham is not a cleric of Abadar, not assisted by Nefreti Klapati. that humans alone put him where he is because humanity wanted Asmodeus dead. The reason that Caden was mysteriously working against Iomide is probably that Iomide is all in favor of Asmodeus being murdered. Who cares if that destroys the world? It all fits. It has a sort of terrifying clarity to it. 100 puzzles reduced to only 2 or 3, and she suspects those aren't the important ones. Brushes past them mentally in the heady rush of realization. And it makes sense of greater Carissa, who must have had the same realizations and then gone to work on. She cannot quite fathom the courage it would have taken to realize all this and decide that in order to enable a compromise, she needed to go sell her soul to Despater. She's pretty sure Despater won't be amused if she in fact dies and shows up party to a conspiracy to, well, technically she's not party to a conspiracy to kill Asmodeus. She's party to a conspiracy to force Asmodeus to terms so that hell can be run by someone who won't destroy people, such as, for example, herself. Or maybe he'd think that hilarious. Maybe he knew all along. Anyway, current leading hypothesis. Keltham got nervous when she went a couple of days without rederiving their plan and caused a scare so she'd get stuffed into a mage's private sanctum so she'd figure it out. Secondary hypothesis. This was a genuine kidnapping rescue attempt that went wrong somehow. Tertiary hypothesis. Nethys was steering for something even weirder and more hyper-specific than she rederives the plan. Evidence in favor of the secondary hypothesis. This is actually a fucking terrible time and place to rederive the plan. If she'd figured it out this morning, she could probably just have bluffed her way out of the forbiddance, no problem. But at this moment, she is locked in a large iron box with 3 wizards far more prepared for combat than she is, only one of which is loyal to her, and possibly would change his mind about that if he were aware that she was apparently a co-conspirator in a plan to overthrow Asmodeus. Does she have some spectacularly clever way to kill 3 security with the advantage of surprise and a lot of fire resistance, but no other particular resources? No, she really doesn't. She's not a combat caster. She's not done preparing her spells. She's going to have fewer spells than usual, and they're going to be incredibly suspicious if she starts casting anything even slightly useful. Could she scrap her lesser artifact headband for spell silver and make it into 3 arrows of greater slaying in the next couple hours if she worked really hard on it? No. Quite aside from how intrinsically horrifying it is to contemplate destroying an item like this, and the fact it's probably only destructible by the will of Despater or immersion in the Lethe or something, and the fact she'd still have to stab them with the arrows of greater slaying, she could probably make one today if she worked at quadruple the normal crafting pace. Not 3. Keltham, did you have a plan here, or was I supposed to get myself out of this one myself? I have to say, Keltham, I think by any reasonable definition we're firmly into complicated romance at this point. It's funny. Figuring it out happened all at once, in a moment of blazing clarity. And the first time, she must have had no time for anything after that. No time for revulsion or horror or self-loathing. She was so busy working out the next steps of the plan, she had so little time in which to take a step back and look at anything. But now, the next steps of the plan require her to finish this here teleport she's building, and it's not done yet. And so there's lots of time to look back at it and really see it. She's awful. She assumes that it had to be her for some reason, that Nethys saw a trillion ways it could go and there wasn't a better one. But she's awful. She wouldn't worship her. People do, but only out of desperation, presumably. Only because Asmodeus has set the bar so terrifyingly, astoundingly low. There's not actually anything to worship. She was horrible to Keltham. She was horrible to Mylol. She was horrible to Peranza and the security, watching. Peranza and the security she had ripped apart, and the mayor, and in every single case it was for nothing. It did not advance her goals. It was just that she thought she was supposed to be, and she thought everyone would be impressed with her, and so she did it. She was presented with people's lives, their eternal fates, their whole selves, people who trusted her, people who believed in her, and she decided what to do based on what would suppress her cognitive dissonance most. She isn't worthy to be a god. She kind of wants to curl up and be a paving stone until she's fixed, except it doesn't fix anything, does it? Turning people into paving stones. Everything she said to the mayor was true of herself as well. Incoherent, cheap, pathetic evil, doing whatever happens to be in front of you, utterly devoid of principles. Selfish, hollow. Except she was wrong to think that hell was any better. Less petty, maybe, but if anything more wasteful, because in humans there is the impulse against wastefulness, the voice that she's stopped listening to, but that absolutely did warn her every time. And in hell, that is quieted. It is kind of astonishing that Keltham agreed to keep working with her at all. Or maybe he didn't, and Peranza and Asmodia were his conditions. Maybe he told her to go sell her soul if she really wanted to start making things right. She'd have done it. Somewhere, distantly, she notices that actually her thoughts are still not adding up, that she's missing something important. Much less than she was missing 10 minutes ago, definitely, but enough to potentially be consequential. Whatever it is, she will probably figure it out once she's not trying to simultaneously prepare a fifth circle spell and keep her face totally unreadable to 3 observers who are on edge and have very good sense motive. She suspects that's kind of cramping her style. It doesn't really feel very like Keltham to order her to sell her soul, and then after she erased the memory of the conversation, order her not to. Obviously, she wasn't going to listen to him, but still. It's a weird order to give if you think she's obviously not going to listen. It also doesn't feel very like Keltham to not just kidnap her last night. Well, probably palace security's pretty good, but this situation merits a wish kidnap, and at minimum, she could have been grabbed while leaving Avernus. Is it possible she wasn't coordinating with him? In that case, he is probably terrified of whatever the fuck she's doing. Just give me 20 minutes, Keltham. I'm coming. She's now unreasonably upset that Mywell isn't going to get his vacation on account of her defecting. She told him he'd get it. Of all the things to find upsetting about having realized that she needs to overthrow her god before her boyfriend tries to kill him. Maybe she can fix that. It's not the best possible trade of credibility for results, but she feels like every single fact about the world she could point to as a fact about who Carissa Sevar is, right now, is a sickening and horrible one, and she can't just... If we're going to be in here a while, I request this morning's communications from Igorian. Read out to me if that's easier than bringing them here. It seems possible that disrupting all our operations incredibly thoroughly with a single scry is what Keltham was going for, here.
Sounds mentally painful. He's glad he doesn't have to do it. Wouldn't do it in any case. He's not having both Seaver non-loyalists present being distracted at the same time. Abarco, get whoever's on the other end of your telepathic bond to read her comms to you. You're on relay. Asking somebody to do that at the same time they prepare spells requires you to be pretty good, but Abarco's not really prepping those spell slots, and if his manifold collapses, it just makes Abarco look stupid, which is a price Hadrian himself is willing to pay.
That sounds very unpleasantly distracting, actually. But if Sevar thinks she has enough concentration to pay attention, he probably has enough attention to repeat what he's hearing.
She's pretty sure without the artifact headband, her scaffold would in fact have collapsed as soon as she started having a stupid emotional crisis. But if that didn't do it, her mail won't. And she can sense that she's intensely distracted, her thoughts racing unproductively down tangents, hiccuping over important considerations and circling back to them, not at her best. It's just, she didn't even need to be at her best to notice this.
Elias Abarco will irritably read Sevar her mail.
Alexite Gellius Rudilus Thrune does know literally one competent project manager, an ally in good standing of his, but the first question this project manager asks will be what happened to Carissa Sevar's last project manager, a piece of information notably missing from her last message, unspoken. In political principle, Carissa could pull Crown authority to get the guy assigned to her willy-nilly, but Carissa Sevar would need to offer a hell of a favor to pry his name out of Alexite if she didn't take good care of her last project manager.
Well, That's a plausible justification for arranging Mayol a nice resort vacation, at least, though she's still worried he's going to be recalled from it if she hasn't acquired a new project manager. Maybe she can put Pilar on it. Does he recommend any resorts?
He listed off 2 options depending on whether she wants somebody to be able to escape their vacation or not.
Ah, Cheliax, Carissa is genuinely and sincerely going to miss it. Not that much. She would like Mylol to spend a week at the resort that is not a prison, and will send them a note to that effect, emphasizing that Myol is a valued person to the Chelish state if he recovers. She will write back to Alexite saying apologetically that the resort is in fact for the last project manager. She is confident she won't make that mistake again, but understands he might not want to rely on that. There's a lot of other stuff she'd have put on this scaffold if she'd known her plan when she started preparing spells, but that'd probably arouse their suspicion, and she can't afford that. This plan goes most smoothly if they're not worried there's a plan at all. She doesn't think that squeezing a silent image onto the end will similarly attract concern. She prepares that one a fair bit for lectures. She listens to the rest of her mail, authorizes a couple of things, and starts tying the spells off. Teleport, greater invisibility, fly, detect thoughts, silent image. She should, in principle, be able to prepare way more spells than that, but this is an incredibly sloppy scaffold. It's probably all the emotional distress. Here goes, then. She'd love her glibness pin, but activating it would be incredibly suspicious. I have some guesses to convey about what Keltham might be doing.
Can relay. Guesses she worked out while doing a decent second attempt fifth circle scaffold, and also answering her mail, apparently.
He's smart. We were obviously going to move me to safety on a probe from a scry, so that was intended. Intended why? Maybe he's going to destroy the project site and wanted me out of the way first, except in that case I'd have expected the follow-up very shortly after. Maybe he's planning to discern location and come after me while I'm obviously going to have fairly little security by comparison. Maybe he's planning something wildly more complicated than that, but regardless, I'm in retrospect unhappy that we did the precise by-the-book thing in response to his perturbation. It means we are definitely precisely where he planned for and wanted. I'm somewhat tempted to go to Dis off that alone. Or to, hold hands and smile while you cast a plane shift to Dis, at least.
Try to route to Her Majesty, or do you want to bid for my making the call on that here and now? Base site doesn't currently have direct comms to anyone with more relevant authority than mine.
Osirian has bizarrely good intel on us, always has. We have no idea why. If you can't reach Igorian directly, I say decide yourself.
You're the Keltham expert. I'll make the call, but if you don't think we need to run out right now, talk to me for a half minute about what you think here, what decision you'd make if it was you, why you'd make that call.
Keltham did something that was obviously going to be noticed, and has not yet followed it up with anything else. The obvious effect of what he did was myself, and I assume probably also Her Majesty, being immediately taken to safely. Anyone with knowledge of Chelish procedure would have predicted that, therefore it's probably the intended result. I don't know what he's playing at. Dath Ilani stories feature very complicated plans. They're all clever, sexually frustrated sadists, and they like it that way. My only takeaway from the fact I can't understand his plan is that it's bad news. I don't know where we are, but Keltham does, and that gives me a bad feeling. If we wouldn't have sent me and Abigail to bunkers because he told us to, then we shouldn't have done it now. I don't think he'll predict Dis. People don't just walk right into hell. It's not safe at our level, except for how I'm Dispatter's favored possession, which he likely doesn't know yet. And even if he talked the entire Padishah Empire into coming to pick me up, they'll refuse him if I'm in hell. For a wide variety of possible plans, anything involving kidnapping me, or demanding Cheliax return me if I love Abigail more, or destroying Cheliax if it doesn't hand me over, or assassinating me, being in Dis thwarts them.
He considers while also relaying the words through his telepathic bond and makes the call. They are in fact underneath Asmodeus's main temple in Ostenso, not wanting to move Savar outside the non-interference zone to somewhere that gods could get at her. But an army to resist the Padishah Empire that is not, and the point about the action having no visible product except their own response action is giving him a bad gut feeling too. All right, let's go to hell. Abarco, you're first through the safe room door.
Respectfully, sir, I should stay behind in case Sevar tries to ditch the plane shift.
On second thought, she's not indifferent between slightly more competent and slightly less competent Abarco.
Interesting idea, Abarco, says Commander Hadrian, this fucking idiot. Abarco did not need to say that out loud. Well, Abarco will realize how he fucked up once he gets the telepathic message that was already en route to relay, ordering Abarco silently to stay out of the plane shift so that a traitorous Sevar could just land on him. Partially, it's his own fault. Hadrian is a fresh commander over Abarco, and shouldn't have assumed Abarco knew Hadrian for a competent commander who'd think of that. Should have warned Abarco of the plan by relay before Hadrian said out loud that he was going along with it. Not that this forgives anything.
You have foiled the brilliant stroke of my master plan to pass up dozens of opportunities to desert, demand to sell my soul, do so, and then immediately desert, she says dryly. They reach the edge of the forbiddance. Rescue teleport? Keltham? No?
Even at INT-24, you can't predict a sequence of events like that or time it precisely when somebody is in a scry-screened area. INT-24 is not enough to knock billiards into billiards and make trick shots deliberately. In fact, that person's strategy was skewed towards exploration rather than exploitation, as makes more sense at the beginning of a task, where information is at its most valuable when amortized over all remaining time. His plan was mostly that he would poke Cheliax and then observe what happened next, using a pair of discern locations on the subsequent movements of Carissa Sevar and Abigail Thrune. The result of the discern locations were that Carissa Sevar was moved to beneath Asmodeus's temple in Ostenso and Abigail Thrune was mind-blanked. This does narrow down a lot of previously probable from his perspective variants and possible worlds. Based on the prior exhibited competence of Cheliax, and their lack of any established fictional genre or real-life history about Dathilani-style dueling geniuses, he does not expect that Cheliax has deduced what he's doing, deduced his probable table of probable possibilities, figured out his sensory modality is discern location, and selected a response optimized over the update he'll make as a result. Augmented Golarion mortals do not appear to be that smart. They do not know the direction in which to try to be that smart even if they have the theoretical brainpower for it. He's going to track that possibility anyways, of course so that they have visualized him partially or in toto, and optimized a response to update him in their preferred direction. Abigail Thrune wouldn't have planned that far in advance, the conspiracy didn't plan that far in advance, but Carissa Sevar has now had serious Dath Ilani exposure and been issued an artifact headband. INT-24 isn't enough to predict a sequence of events like that, it is enough to list out lots of possibilities and optimize over the probable ones. That person did explicitly consider that Carissa, having obtained an artifact headband, had been cognitively perturbed and might defect from Cheliax once out of her previous state of mind. That person did moreover explicitly consider that Carissa might be more ripe for defection from Cheliax if she was put into a situation where her mind was knowably to her probably not being read, such as a situation which prompted high-powered non-detection or mind blank. This situation, as is in fact not exactly what has occurred, was his major possibility BER5, sub-possibility BER5.3, probability 3%. That person credits tropes less than he once did, having worked out some of the hidden rails of causality underneath, that gods were meddling too. But he assigns weird coincidences a higher probability than if he hadn't run into all the weird shit he had. Something is messing with probability around this planet. It is worth the extra effort to give that force some small boosts and opportunities to mess in his favor, if it happens to be so inclined. That 3% chance is not the only equivalence class of outcome where Carissa Sevar defects for some reason today as a result of causality playing out from his plan. Therefore, that person has placed himself where he can hear ascending. He's protected against demands, obviously. And he also timed his probe by when, according to Ione Sala's allowable pre-Nefredi knowledge, Carissa Sevar would just be waking up if she was sleeping according to her usual ring of sustenance habits. He timed it for then plus 20 minutes. That, he reasoned, ought to prevent Carissa from having already hung spells that day, and would give Carissa a chance to hang spells useful in defecting if she ended up put under a mind blank to prevent wish-napping by him, and the artifact headband boosts made her realize that serving Asmodeus was stupid. INT-24 is not enough to predict an exact sequence of events, so that outcome is not mostly what that person expects to happen. He's not going to show up with a mercenary army unless Carissa manages to call him about that or signal him in any number of possible ways. There's all kinds of possible ways for Carissa to escape once mind blanked, right? Probably the tropes will be with her. If the only result of things playing out like that is for Carissa to break with Asmodeus, but find herself with no clever options besides confessing the fact to Cheliax before they detect her thoughts about it, they'll presumably employ her the way Asmodea was employed, or put her into storage to trade to him. In this case, they no longer have a high-level Ilani augment of their own to oppose him. That isn't his optimally desired outcome, but it's an improvement over status quo ante. Besides the information gained by discern location, most of that person's positive expectations of probe results are about cases where Cheliax initiates negotiations with him to not destroy Cheliax. What actually happened instead, here, is not something where he could afterwards say, all according to plan. But that's how it goes when you're merely INT-24.
And now Hadrian has to make a call, actually leave Abarco behind. With Savar forewarned, she wouldn't be catchable that way. Or he could secretly order Abarco to come with and bet on Savar not being sufficiently confident of his doing that to stay behind if she's a traitor, which she probably isn't, and Abarco is potentially pretty useful in hell. Of course, the traitorous Savar would expect him to reason like that. Savar's point about not being predictable to Ilani is well taken. Hadrian orders over telepathic bond for base to spin some coins or roll a die, whichever they can get to immediately, and have Abarco stay behind with 1-4 or 1-3 probability. Commander Hadrian doesn't have a fancy artifact headband, but he does have native INT-17 and a +6 headband, and has read some Project Lawful transcripts, so he's not wholly at sea in this crowd.
She really is going to miss it here. She takes Hadrian's hand and Oligario's and does not resist the plane shift.
Resist energy, fire for everyone, air bubble for everyone, plane shift to Avernus for everyone, roughly targeting an area he knows Cheliax sometimes passes through. Abarco can stay behind if the probabilities went that way.
They came out in favor of his coming with. He's here.
Carissa rolls her eyes at him. My teleport. I've been at this site most recently.
It's not Hadrian's first time in hell, but the endless background screaming isn't any less disturbing a second time. They're no longer in a mage's private sanctum. He could dispel his non-detection on Savar, order her to fail her will save against detect thoughts. The hypothetical enemy probably couldn't nail a scry on her in a short time window, but he does not have prepped another of his more meta-magicked non-detections. Realistically, they are in hell. It is a dangerous place. Savar has just sold her soul of her own will, and this will probably go better if they put aside some hesitations and work together. Go ahead and try it, he tells Savar. If she fucks up her very first teleport, they'll not be any more lost than they are already.
It's worse without the planar adaptation. It's better with the knowledge that she needs to overthrow Asmodeus. Carissa tries to hold in her mind the image of the fortress she left from just a few days ago and teleport the four of them, and in fact fucks it up. Well, not that badly. This is the fortress, but she managed to zap them all with discharging spell energy along the way, severely enough to kill a normal person, but not actually all that badly for some fifth circle casters. Sorry, she almost says before she remembers. She is Carissa Savar and not the most junior member of this excursion. She will simply pretend that didn't happen, like any dignified Chelish person would.
Anyone hit by that hard enough we should infernal heal? No. All right, Savar, what do we do here?
Rugaton did the talking. They all ask, do you offer a payment or a threat? And she said, I am the high priestess of Asmodeus in Galarian, about Asmodeus's business. You will serve me as is your duty. And then they each let us through. I can talk, if you think they won't back off for you.
Hadrian weighs possibilities, concludes that with them being in literal hell and headed to Dis, he's mostly going to have to play this on the assumption Savar isn't planning to betray them all. You'd know better than me whether devils would be more likely to back off for me or you, unless you don't know, in which case my guess is that our strongest threat does the talking, so that's me. How do we get the outer gate to open at all? I don't see anything resembling a knocker.
Aspexia Rugaton just knocked. The result was very loud. She might secretly have a strength of 30 or something. I don't know who devils would be likelier to back off for.
I'll do the talking, I guess. He knocks on the door. With an admonishing ray, he's not going to need non-lethal damage for anything else in hell.
After a pause, the fortress door swings open and a being comes forth like a withered cadaver made of bone. Its eyes pass over the other mortals out of Cheliax, even the one stronger than itself, settles upon that mortal who was previously escorted by a ninth circle priestess of Asmodeus and spoke before her, and now returns with a mighty crown of hell upon her brow. It waits for the strongest to speak.
Hadrian of Cheliax, as is Asmodeus's country in Golarion, and serves him. I am here escorting Carissa Sevar, who is named Favored Soul of Dispater, and we require entry to Dis.
Carissa Sevar stands impassive and motionless behind him. And behind her, a silent image in Infernal reads, "They are not serve me, and should not pass alive." One of the verbs is conjugated slightly wrong, not in a way that changes the meaning. Carissa was never very good at Infernal.
"Enter, then," it says to them all, and behind it the second doors of the fortress swing open, revealing the nightmare of chains and gears that guides the maze.
Maybe it's easier when you've got Dispater's favored with you, instead of just Aspexia Rugaton. The politics of hell often have little respect for Galerion's ranks. Hadrian enters, assuming the others will follow him.
She will follow.
The bony nightmare waits until they've passed and then joins this party that the chain nightmare will escort through the maze. As they travel in maze corridors and pass a company of barbed devils, those fall in as an escort at a wordless gesture from the bony thing. Through the maze they go. Further companies of barbed devils are left undisturbed.
She relaxes once it's obvious the message was understood. Sorry, Oligario.
If you wish to support this AI reading and others like it, please visit patreon.com/AskWhoCastsAI. Any help is appreciated. And thank you to executive producer John Doe 7776059.